April 14th, 1912. In the freezing waters of the North Atlantic, more than 2,200 people were asleep aboard the world's most luxurious ship. They believed they were sailing on the safest vessel ever built. Just a few hours later, over 1,500 of them would be dead. But how could the greatest ship on Earth disappear into the ocean on its very first voyage? At the beginning of the 20th century, the world was changing faster than ever before. Technology was advancing. Wealth was growing. Nations competed to build bigger cities, faster trains, and larger ships. The Atlantic Ocean had become the world's busiest highway, connecting Europe to America. Every week, thousands of people crossed it in search of opportunity. Shipping companies were locked in a fierce competition. Every company wanted to own the fastest, the biggest, and the most luxurious ship ever built. One company believed it could create something the world had never seen before. A ship so advanced, so powerful, that many people believed it could never sink. That ship was called RMS Titanic. At over 269 meters long, it was the largest moving object ever built by humans at the time. Inside were grand staircases, luxury suites, fine restaurants, a swimming pool, electric elevators, and comforts that most people had never imagined. Newspapers proudly called it the ship that could never sink. But behind the luxury and behind the confidence, there were warning signs that almost no one noticed. Decisions made before the ship even left the harbor would help shape one of history's greatest disasters. And the first mistake had already been made before Titanic ever touched the open sea. In 1907, one man had an ambitious dream. He wanted to build a ship so magnificent that it would leave every competitor behind. It wouldn't be the fastest ship in the world. It would be the most luxurious. A floating palace unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Construction began in Belfast, Ireland, at the famous Harland and Wolff shipyard. More than 15,000 workers spent over 2 years building what many believed would become the greatest engineering achievement of the modern world. Day after day, steel plates were lifted into place. Thousands of red-hot rivets were hammered by hand, and slowly, an enormous ship began to rise above the skyline. Titanic stretched over 269 meters, stood as tall as an 11-story building, and weighed more than 46,000 tons. Inside were elegant dining halls, a grand staircase, electric elevators, Turkish baths, a swimming pool, libraries, cafes, and luxurious first-class suites that rivaled the finest hotels in Europe. For wealthy passengers, this wasn't just transportation. It was the ultimate symbol of luxury. Titanic included one of the most advanced safety systems ever built. 16 watertight compartments were designed to keep the ship floating even if several sections filled with water. Newspapers proudly praised its revolutionary design. Soon, people began calling Titanic the unsinkable ship. Confidence turned into pride, and pride would soon become one of history's greatest mistakes. But behind the celebration, hidden problems already existed. Some experts questioned the quality of certain materials. Others worried there weren't enough lifeboats for everyone on board. Their concerns were ignored. Just days later, Titanic would leave Southampton on her maiden voyage. No one knew they were sailing directly toward one of history's deadliest disasters. On April 10th, 1912, the Titanic finally began her maiden voyage from Southampton, England. Crowds gathered at the harbor to witness history. Some waved goodbye with excitement, while others never imagined they were saying their final farewell. More than 2,200 people were on board, but they were living in completely different worlds. In first class were some of the richest people on Earth, millionaires, business tycoons, politicians, and celebrities. Meanwhile, deep below the luxurious decks, thousands of immigrants traveled in third class. They carried almost nothing except hope, dreaming of a better life in America. Life on Titanic felt like a dream. Wealthy passengers enjoyed gourmet meals, live orchestras, luxurious lounges, and elegant evening parties. Children played on the decks. Couples admired the endless Atlantic Ocean. Even third-class passengers laughed, danced, and celebrated the chance to begin a new life. No one believed danger was waiting ahead. As Titanic crossed the Atlantic, wireless operators began receiving messages from nearby ships. They weren't ordinary messages. They were warnings. Several ships reported dangerous ice fields directly ahead. But confidence in Titanic was so high that many believed there was nothing to fear. Night was falling. The sea was unusually calm. The air grew colder with every passing minute. Ahead, hidden in the darkness, an enormous iceberg was waiting. And within hours, the unsinkable ship would face its greatest test. It was the evening of April 14th, 1912. The North Atlantic was unusually calm. There were no strong waves, no heavy winds, and the sky was filled with bright stars. To the passengers, it looked like the perfect night. But experienced sailors knew something was wrong. Calm water made icebergs much harder to see because there were no waves crashing against them. Throughout the day, several nearby ships sent urgent wireless messages. They warned that massive icebergs were drifting directly into Titanic's path. Some warnings reached the bridge. Others never reached Captain Edward Smith because the wireless operators were busy sending passengers personal messages. Every minute brought the ship closer to danger. Despite the warnings, Titanic continued sailing at nearly full speed, over 22 knots. Some historians believe the crew wanted to arrive in New York ahead of schedule. Others believe they simply trusted the ship too much. Whatever the reason, slowing down was never seriously considered. At exactly 11:40 p.m., Lookout Frederick Fleet suddenly froze. In the darkness, a giant iceberg appeared directly ahead. He grabbed the warning bell. Ring, ring, ring. Then he picked up the telephone and shouted the words that would echo through history. The officers reacted instantly. Hard as starboard, full speed astern. But would it be enough? In just a few seconds, the world's most famous ship would collide with the iceberg, and history would change forever. At 11:40 p.m., the officers did everything they could to avoid the iceberg. The giant ship began turning, but it was already too late. Instead of hitting the iceberg head-on, Titanic scraped along its side. The collision lasted only a few seconds, and many passengers barely noticed it. Some felt a slight vibration. Others thought the engines had simply stopped. But below the waterline, disaster had already begun. The iceberg sliced open several compartments on the starboard side of the ship. Freezing Atlantic water rushed inside with incredible force. Within minutes, engineers realized something terrifying. Titanic had been designed to survive if 4 compartments flooded. But 6 compartments were now filling with water. The ship's fate had already been sealed. Ship designer Thomas Andrews carefully inspected the damage. After calculating how quickly the compartments were filling, he delivered heartbreaking news to Captain Edward Smith. The ship will sink. It wasn't a question anymore. It was a certainty. Titanic had less than 3 hours left. At first, passengers were told there was no serious danger. Crew members calmly asked everyone to put on life jackets and move toward the boat deck. Many people laughed. Some refused to leave the warm cabins. They couldn't believe that the world's most luxurious ship was actually sinking. Then came the order no one wanted to hear. Prepare the lifeboats. But there was one horrifying problem. Titanic carried more than 2,200 people, yet there were lifeboats for only about half of them. Next part coming soon.